Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
The multiverse. When one universe isn't enough. The universe was supposed to be all there is, the whole of existence. For centuries, the size of the universe and whether or not it is finite has fascinated scientists and philosophers. However, a cosmic spanner has been thrown into the works and is the subject of a new book called The Multiverse. When one universe isn't enough, I'm delighted to say, welcoming back on the show, the man who's going to try and demystify the secrets of the multiverse to a complete Luddite. I'm delighted to say that Brian Clegg joins me live on the line once again. Brian, it's great to welcome you back to Talk Radio Europe.
Good morning, Giles. It's great to speak with you.
Right, so here we go. So from people who haven't really evolved since I grew gills or whatever and flopped onto a beach, I have a bad enough time trying to get my head around the infinite universe, i.e. time, space, continuum, etc. That's enough of a headache. And just when you get your brain around that one, then Hollywood go out and put a whole bunch of films that use the word multiverse, and you think, oh, this is quite interesting. And then there is the possibility of a multiverse existing on so many different levels. So, as I am basically an intellectual 5-year-old, Brian, try and explain the basics to me, please.
Sure. So, I mean, the whole concept of the multiverse really is, as you say, a bit bizarre. The universe is supposed to be everything that exists, all space, all time, all that. But the idea of a multiverse is to say, okay, well, what if actually that's not everything? There's something more. There's something extra. And in fiction, it's often popped up as a sort of parallel dimension, the something where it used to always be in the comics when I was a kid, the evil things coming through from another dimension or whatever. And the idea is to think, we live in 3 dimensions of space, one at a time. But what if there were more, not connected to ours, but if you like, parallel to them, so that if you could have their own 3 dimensions and they're existing out there somewhere else, but somehow can get through to us. You need this somehow to get through to us for there to be a story in the fiction. In the reality of this, where scientists think about it, often there isn't a way to connect the two. So the multiverse is a sort of a conceptual thing where you may never be able to actually directly get to it, but their idea is still that there are other dimensions of space and time, and there's all sorts of different ways that scientists have come up to think of the possibility of this being really the case.
I mean, let's start with in my case, the easiest one to comprehend, okay, which is...
Yep.
Let's go back to life on Earth, life in the universe, etc. That is possible due to please don't start phoning in with your theories, but, because of a very, very specific set of circumstances which enable life in this universe. And if we think of the universe as just one place, shall we say that's the UK and Europe, but there's possibilities that there might be other universes who've had the same condition that we don't know about. So in southern Spain, I'm using that in a parlance I can get my head around. So there might be a universe kind of over there that we haven't contacted yet, and that's got life there. Is that a multiverse as well, or are we having to get more esoteric on this one?
Well, I think the thing about the life bit, about the existence of life, is what we find when we look at the universe around us is it seems to be very fine-tuned to be just right for life. It's kind of a Goldilocks universe where there are various different sort of natural values for, say, various forces and that kind of thing, that if they're just a tiny little bit different, we couldn't have life. Simple example, particles called neutrons. Every atom, pretty much, apart from hydrogen, has neutrons in it. We couldn't have other atoms. If it was just 1% lighter, the neutron, atoms wouldn't form at all. So it just one tiny percentage point out, no life, because there's no atoms. And there are loads and loads of these things where the constants of the universe are just right for us to exist. And scientists don't like that. They don't like the idea that something really unlikely has happened. And so one way they try to get around this is this so-called fine-tuning problem is to say, okay, if there is a multiverse, so lots of different universes, each with different constants in, then inevitably one of them is going to be just right for life. And if we're going to be there, then it's our universe, because they have to be right. And so that's why it's like this. And that's one of the reasons scientists quite like the idea of there being a multiverse, even if we can't necessarily ever go to or see into these other universes. Unfortunately, it's also a statistical fallacy. They're misusing statistics when they do this.
So, I mean, science loves a fluke, doesn't it? But the problem with science, you've got to reproduce that fluke, and that to make it scientific, and to write a report on it or a paper on it.
Yeah, but the main thing is basically there's a really nice example. This is called the inverse gambler's fallacy.
Okay,
and the idea is, to work this idea that we can deduce there's a multiverse out there because we are so weird, our universe is so unlikely, is a bit like if you walk into a casino and the first person you come across is winning all the time, and you go in with your friend, the cosmologist, she's going to say to you, "Oh, the casino must be full because that person's winning all the time." But that doesn't make any sense, because we've only seen one person. We have no idea about the rest of the casino. And it's exactly the same with the multiverse concept. Just because our universe is unlikely, it doesn't tell us anything whatsoever about the existing of other parts. But it's really what has driven thinking about it. And once we start to think about it, there's all sorts of different possibilities for how multiverses could exist. It's not just the simple one of perhaps there are different universes popping up in space. There are all sorts of things. One of my favorites is the so-called virtual universe multiverse. And the idea of this is, what if we're all in a simulation, basically a computer simulation? Then if that's true, there could be lots of them out there. There have to be at least two, because there's the real universe and there's our fake one where we live in a simulation. But there could be millions of them out there. That's a very simplistic one. There's lots with more complicated physics involved, but all of them basically tend to come up with universes which really don't interact with each other. It's very difficult to find a way to have multiverse where you can get from one universe to another one, as you always see in the fiction, because it's pretty pointless as fiction if you can't get from one to another.
Yeah, and it would. I mean, and also this is the whole thing about, like, and here we go, time. We're talking about, do we think of time and space in the wrong way? Because we think linear. Our perception of time, and indeed distance, is linear. Start date, end date. So, 1066 to 2025. But actually we should be thinking of time as a circle or some other form of mark, because that brings up the possibility, does it not, of things repeating themselves, but you could have multiverses where there are alternative versions, which is another one beloved of science fiction. If I turned left, it's a sliding doors thing. If I turned left instead of right, and so there are various contrafactual histories of, if I'd done this would happen. So there are various versions of me existing in millions of universes based on decisions I make, and therefore that's another multiverse. Is that something that you even look at, or is that too far fetched?
No, that's definitely actually quite a common one. Yeah. Not so much the circularity, but this idea of every time, if you like, there's a decision, there's a sliding doors moment where you could do one thing or another, that it's not a case that just one thing happens, but everything that's possible happens. We just happen to be in one timeline, if you like, through that. It's something that's usually referred to as many worlds. And it actually comes out of quantum physics, the physics of the very small, because there's something slightly weird in quantum physics that it's quite difficult to explain how a particular outcome happens, because quantum physics is all about probabilities. A particle might do one thing, might do another. And the one way of getting around that is to say, okay, each time there's two possible outcomes for what a particle might do. The universe splits. There's one where one thing happens, one where another thing happens. So literally, there are, in this theory, there are getting on for billions of universes with you in them, but each with every single decision that's happened in the past, every single atom that's moved around slightly differently in the past. you have a different universe. Now that requires an awful lot of universes, and some people think it's kind of a bit overkill to deal with a bit of a problem with explaining quantum theory. But a fair number of physicists do actually think this is a reasonable possibility. There is actually one way some people have suggested testing this, though I ought to stress you should not try this at home, and this is to shoot yourself. Now, the theory is there are going to be some universes in which the gun jams, there's something wrong with the bullet, whatever, and you survive. And because your consciousness has to be in one of the universes where you survive, you will always survive. So you can shoot yourself in the head as much as you like, and you will carry on living. So in theory, if you did that experiment, you would know that this was true. There really was this many worlds universe. But the trouble is you can't prove it to anybody. And also, as I say, I would strongly not recommend doing it because in practice, I don't think it's going to work.
And so that would be a basic law of this as well, because you cannot cross into multiverses. There must be literally a locked door, presumably, because otherwise you could come back and say, or you might be able to travel back and go, hi guys, just to let you know that there are multiverses out there. So presumably with a door you shut, and also you wouldn't want to visit, yourself or another version of yourself in a multiverse, because again, that could be, you have no idea what the end effects of that ripple effect would be on the time-space continuum, Brian. And my head is already throbbing here, but here we go.
Yeah, it's a bit painful. Now, I think what you've got to think with that one, if it's almost like a branching tree, that, every time there's a decision, every time something happens, it's splitting off into lots of different futures. They're all separate from each other. They don't interact with each other. And so in that circumstance, there will always be some of those branches where you survive something where you don't survive in other ones. And the conscious you, as it were, for the future will always be in one of those branches, or many of those branches. But there's no interaction between them, as you say. So there's lots of universes there where you would never find the right answer. But anyone that you're conscious of, anyone that, the conscious you is in, will inevitably have to have survived beyond that point for you to be able to say, hey, it's okay.
This is a rabbit hole you can go down, but there must be, because Brian, you're a busy man. If you've done this sort of thing before, it's all very pontificating and specific, and drawing up these what could and what couldn't. Is there a practical use, if you like, in cosmology or indeed in modern physics for the multiverse? Could it be used? Quantum was unknown about the majority of people, perhaps like 100 years ago. So, is there can you use, or can people at a higher grade than me use the idea of a multiverse to help, especially with things like cosmology, because there's all these bits and pieces crashing around the place in outer space.
Yeah, cosmology is definitely where most of this lives, if you like, are trying to understand the whole of the universe, rather the multiverse. Cosmology is very much about looking beyond practical stuff to what everything's like. And it's fascinating as a subject. But I think there comes a point where you have to question whether it's science at all, some of the aspects of it. So some theories about universes, about multiverses, are really quite difficult to pin down. One thing I do in the book towards the end, I've got a collection of quotes from various sources which have questions as titles for magazine articles. It's great for generating magazine articles. And they're all things like, I don't know, one was, Google claims to have discovered staggering proof we live in a multiverse, which was in a UK newspaper. But unfortunately, they don't. All they're saying is in our quantum computers, because bits of the quantum computer can interact with each other, it's a bit like as if there were multiverses and different universes were talking to each other. But it's not. It's just an analogy. They're just using it as that. And one danger I think we have with science is, when you're talking about practicality, is we can overhype what's happening. Science can be really interesting without necessarily being practical in everyday use. And some of these, ways it's presented, I think, can make it sound as if it's something dramatic. It's not actually multiverses, but one of my favorite examples of overhyping was a few years ago. There was a story where the headlines in very respectable newspapers, one of them said, scientists finally discover real working lightsaber. Apart from anything else, I really like that finally, as if, what have they been doing all this time? And what they'd actually done is get two little photons of light to very briefly interact with each other. And it's interesting physics, but has nothing to do with reality at all in terms of practicality. It certainly isn't a lightsaber. And I think with multiverses as well, we have to take that step back and think, this could be interesting, fascinating stuff to play with your mind. It makes great stories, but it's not, frankly, going to influence our everyday lives.
But we want Benedict Cumberbatch in the full Doctor Strange thing to come through and, pop through the multiverse. Brian, when you write about this, I mean, how do you? I mean, I know you're a clever person, to put it mildly, but how do you put this in layman's terms? Because, as I said before, you've done this before brilliantly. Do you sort of debunk a few myths and then go, okay, this is actually the premise and how we think it works?
Yeah, I think what you've got to do is try to relate it to anything you have experience of. So, I mean, just as one example. One of the possible universe theories is something that involves something called bouncing brains. And that this is not brains as in the stuff in your head. This is BRANES.
Okay.
And it's short for membranes, but they call them brains because they're multidimensional. And the idea of this is basically that out there in the universe, there are multidimensional things. So you've got your 3 dimensions of space, one of time, floating around, and sometimes they bump into each other. Each of these things is a universe, and when they bump into each other, obviously that has an effect. And it's suggested that could be what the Big Bang was at the start of what we regard as the start of our universe, that's actually been around forever. But another of these brain universes came and hit it and basically reset it, almost like, you hit your computer because you're fed up with it.
Have you tried turning your universe on and off again, basically?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So sometimes, it's little things like thinking about what can you draw a parallel, and you've just done it perfectly. The turning the universe on and off again. That's genuinely one of the suggestions is how the Big Bang happened in the first place, because, we know an awful lot about what happened very soon after the Big Bang. Micro fraction of a second, we can say pretty confidently what's happened all the way through to the present. But what we have no idea about what has happened at the point or just before the Big Bang. How did it all start? And so what scientists like to do is think about, okay, how could it happen? They make these models, these mental models, in this case, of these 4-dimensional objects floating around, bumping into each other. Say, could that work? Could that provide something? And so when you're trying to explain this, I guess it's trying to get in the head of those people, but stay out of the maths, because frankly, a lot of modern physics is almost entirely driven by maths, and it's pretty difficult really ever to explain that part of it. It's more trying to get what the pictures are, what the models are that are being used.
What are you hoping, Brian, that people will take from your book, The Multiverse, when one universe isn't enough?
Sorry, I lost the end of that.
What do you hope that people, apart from, I have a very dull throbbing sensation, obviously, on my frontal lobes, but what are you hoping that people will discover and ponder with the book?
I think in the end, it's a subject, even though we can never be certain, it's something everybody likes to think a little bit about. Where did it all come from? How did it start? Why did it start? And, for some people, the answer is God. Somebody created it all. And some people have actually said this fine-tuning problem, actually, this idea that everything is so accurately focused for life. There's a famous physicist from my youth called Fred Hoyle, great guy, real Yorkshireman, and he was an atheist, dead against the concept of God, but he actually said, as far as he was concerned, the only reasonable explanation for the fine-tuning problem was there was some sort of creator. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with religious expectations, but something had to have set that up. So that's one way of looking at it. But obviously, many scientists don't like the idea for various reasons and prefer to think of some physical reason why it could have happened, where the universe could come from. And that's what starts coming through. If you look at their different ideas, they're really just searching for something I think we all would like to know a little bit more about. It's at the borderline between philosophy and physics, really. It's about why are we here? Where's the universe come from? And as such, I think it is interesting as long as you can make it approachable.
The book is called The Multiverse, When One Universe Isn't Enough. It's available in this universe, but you can go onto our website and you'll see a picture of the book. Click on it and it will be making its way to you. Brian, if people want to find you online and basically get their minds blown, where's the best place to say nice things to you?
On my website, which is Brian Clegg, BrianClegg.net. You can send me a message. You can look at what's going on and all that stuff.
The book is called The Multiverse. It's by Brian Clegg. Brian, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Giles. I'm sorry about what I've done to your head.
It's all right. I'm going to put a large ice pack on it, and then I'll be fine. I might watch a Kardashian thing just to get it, just to bring it down a bit. So there you go, Brian Clegg. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.